happen and all this magical technology, some of which I'm sure I'm not familiar with, but nonetheless, thanks to the staff. This is obviously a critical issue. How we monitor and oversee ethics, the lobbying industry, and the conduct of those people who essentially the public hire to represent them and make the decisions, the policy choices, how to raise and spend money, how to make government work, and not only at a state level, but also as a local level, because many of these laws, at least the lobbying laws, for example, would affect how local government performs. As you know, in Albany, as in other state capitals, it's not just lobbying, but spending contributions as well as lobbying gives wealthy and well-resourced interests an enormous influence over governmental decisions. And while citizens and the media play an important role and they have to be vigilant, ultimately the state's watchdog agencies are the critical component to the success in advancing ethics in the state. Prosecutors at a local, state, and federal level can also play an important role, and unfortunately we've seen them play far too big a role recently, which means that something at lower levels is not happening. When it comes to oversight entities, far too frequently the appointees to these agencies seek to hide from their responsibilities to the public and instead seem more interested in serving their masters, the so-called appointing authorities in statutory jargon that put them in the various boards. Independence from the institutions they police and the sponsors who nominate or appoint them is a paramount concern. And without going through the litany of scandals and names, certainly in the last decade, New York's experienced a phenomenal run of scandals, indictments, and convictions that have shaken public trust in government. While some of this misconduct has occurred at the local level, far too much of it has occurred here in the state capitol, in the halls of the legislature, with sitting senators, assembly members, and even governors caught engaging in misfeasance, malfeasance, and to be plain spoken, just plain criminal, reprehensible conduct. In order to repair the public's trust in government, watchdog agencies must play a leading role in improving the state's ethical climate. And unfortunately, much of the worst behavior has occurred after what had been widely heralded as an amazing step forward when we reorganized the oversight of lobbying and ethics in 2007. With this backdrop in mind, NYPIRG offers today a baker's dozen list of recommendations, and we urge the Senate to keep them in mind as you consider this issue and as we move forward this session. Hopefully 2011 will see us make it over the goal line, which we came close to last year. Number one in NYPIRG's recommendations is that the key to effective oversight is an independent oversight board. We supported the legislation that was vetoed by the governor. We support Senator Squadron's bill that contains what we consider to be real steps forward in terms of independent oversight. The board should not contain a majority of gubernatorial appointees on the ethics and lobbying side, if that's the way it's divided. One of the most glaring problems with the structure of an entity that oversees advocacy is the balance and the public perception of control of the Oversight Commission. We had real concerns in 2007 when the old State Ethics Commission and the Lobbying Commission were merged, and we flagged this as a serious problem. Unfortunately, those fears were realized and were the subject of a blistering report from the Inspector General on the conduct of the Commission on Public Integrity during the so-called Troopergate episode. And you know, in considering these issues and proposals, we have to be mindful that the laws will apply beyond the current incumbents. It's not you and your colleagues and whoever the current incumbent is in the governor's office, but rather not those who we base our trust on and we now know, but rather those people in the future who we may not even know who they are, but they will someday be making those decisions under those laws. So we need to be mindful of that. Second point is that the Oversight Commission, again, this is assuming there's a configuration similar to the current one, but the Oversight Commission should be right-sized. In his departing comments, the former chairman of the Commission on Public Integrity, Michael Cherkasky, said that 13 members was too many, it was unwieldy, and he suggested that 5 to 7 members would be a more appropriate number. Number 3, we need to make sure that the executive directors, whether it be on the legislative side, the lobbying, ethics, that they are insulated from political pressure. We entrust them with doing important work. They work hard. They undertake many critically important issues, and they need to be free from political pressure. Clearly, Inspector General reports suggested that the former executive director of CPI felt some pressure or some duty or some interest to engage in conduct that was inappropriate. We think you need to be more restrictive about who can sit on these oversight boards. It was almost comical in the first meeting of the newly constituted lobby commission back in, I guess, 2008, when there was a parade of members recusing themselves in the very first meeting. Everyone was conflicted in some way. To their credit, they stepped out of the meeting. I think we can do better. We can find people who don't have so many ties to government. I know in 19 million people in New York State, there's retirees, there's academics, there's people who have the time, have the interest. The same people who could sit on juries can figure out the complicated world of Albany and ethics and lobbying, and I think we should broaden who we have sit on those commissions. Sure, absolutely. My apologies. The open meeting law, that should be followed strictly. We agreed with attempts to separate the elections enforcement with respect to campaign finance. It's so closely tied to lobbying that it should be separately enforced. The Board of Elections, as we know, is partisan gridlock to the nth degree. We do need to get a handle on the other side of the influence peddling coin, which is the role that lobbyists often play in helping to raise campaign contributions for public officials. We can do better in terms of the conflict of interest disclosures, which has been subject of much discussion in the media and elsewhere. We think you can expand the definition of lobbying to capture more activity. That would be a good idea. There's a lot of lobbying that goes on that isn't technically fit the definition, and that would be useful and give you a fuller picture of what's happening in the state capitol. Stronger penalties. Number 11, an emphasis on prevention, better training, more ethical guidance. Legislators and staff requesting advisory opinions before they take some action. And we don't mean the kind of training that would be, don't put this in the mail because you may therefore invoke some federal jurisdiction. We mean real deterrence, real training. Number 12, give the watchdogs adequate resources. They need the resources to do their job. In a $130 billion budget, it's not that much. Let's make sure they have the resources. And finally, in terms of disclosure, we think the databases can be improved to allow easy access to raw data, and that will help the public, the media, understand what's happening better. My apologies if I've run over.